Making a Bob Dylan biopic is a tall order for any director. Dylan is a legendary signpost of Western culture. Retell his biography, and you bring nothing new to the table. Try to put your own mark on the legend, or go too far into his dirty laundry, and you risk creating something akin to blasphemy. The safest route is to go all in on the mythos. That's what James Mangold has done with A Complete Unknown. His and Timothy Chalamet's Dylan is a tribute. It perpetuates the legend of the great prophet as we've known it for the last 60-some years. There's little that's new factually about this retelling of Dylan's origin story, and it does, in places, descend into blatant hero worship, but the film left me with a distinct sense of wonder, as well as a slight feeling of melancholy. Dylan is an old world relic from an analogue time, yet Mangold reminds us that even his oldest songs and lyrics ring true through history. We begin with Dylan arriving in New York in 1961. Our world-weary beatnik is cuddled up in the back of an old wagon, guitar at his side, scribbling great truths in his notebook. Within the first 10 minutes, he's already met with two Olympians of 20th century American music, Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger. Naturally, Dylan plays them a song, and they love the song. Everyone loves Dylan and Mangold's New York, they just can't help it. They all saw his world-changing potential from the start. What follows is pretty standard fare for a musical biopic. Dylan wanders around the village, courting dazed women and playing local hotspots, venues which, these days, are practically enshrined as religious sites. He's signed to Columbia Records without much fuss, joins the folk circuit, and falls in with the 2 points of the movie's love triangle, Sylvia Russo and Joan Baez, played by Elle Fanning and Monica Barbaro, respectively. It's during the movie's first act that Dylan's early hits come to him, many of them without fanfare. This is another part of the Dylan myth Mangold loves to drive home. Blowing in the Wind was no labour of love, not really. It wasn't created so much as begotten. The lad was always in the right place at the right time. Now, this isn't a criticism from me, to be clear. I love the Dylan mythos, and I want to believe in a world in which God can bestow brilliant artistic destinies on a select few. Mangold clearly wants us to believe in this kind of world too. If you're looking for a dispassionate, objective account of Dylan's formative years, this isn't it. Little is made of Dylan's childhood, or his upbringing in Minnesota. As even the title of the movie states, he's an absolute. A ramblin' carny who emerged on the scene one winter's day to just change everything. I imagine that Jesus' years as an apprentice carpenter weren't super interesting either. The mythos isn't just conveyed through narrative. There are countless shots in which other people, usually Joan Baez for some reason, are captured in a slack-jawed stare while Dylan plays one of his iconic tunes. It's always the same shot, a close-up, slowly panning in on the actor's face. The characters just can't believe what they're seeing. Look, Mangold is saying, just look how amazing he was. These shots are frequent enough and long enough that you can place yourself in them if you want to. Some viewers are Baez, full of grudging admiration. Some are Seeger, adoring and gleeful like a dad. Others are like Sylvia, intrigued, inquisitive, yet not fully convinced. These shots have an interesting impact on Dylan's heroic veneer. The man wrote some incredible songs, and he definitely had a unique presence, but he wasn't the most gifted singer, nor the best guitar player of his time. Far from it, in fact. Joan Baez's portrayal drives this home. She had the purer voice, the cleaner fretwork, and yet she finds herself sidelined by his emergent genius. I do appreciate that, in all but one instance, Mangold chose to portray Dylan's technique as it was, warts and all. You could argue that the doe-eyed stares of onlookers are meant to offset that fact, to say, it was never about the guitar or the singing. Dylan is more than the sum of his parts. The film's second act reminds us all of how Dylan's meteoric rise to fame affected him, how it made him cold, distant, ornery, arrogant, how the people made him larger than life, and how his introversion, more than his egotism, perpetuated that persona. We're not shown how all of this dissatisfaction led to the creation of Highway 61 Revisited, but in terms of the movie's plot, the two things are consequential. As the film would have it, one day, when Dylan is in studio, he decides to go electric. All the thinking and writing and creative malaise, for the most part, happens off-screen. That's an expeditious choice, and not necessarily a bad thing. The film culminates in Dylan's now infamous closing set at the 65 Newport Folk Festival. This is the climax of the film's central conflict, which is using the term pretty loosely because the quandary isn't particularly earth-shattering. Bob's asked by the organisers to stay acoustic, he says shan't, and there's a lot of brooding about their audacity. It's the man, keeping me down. They just don't understand, Dylan says, and through him, Mangold says, yeah, they just didn't understand. The point Mangold seems to be making is that this festival set was a watershed moment in Dylan's career. The turbulent moment in which the everyman troubadour truly cut his teeth, becoming the untouchable legend. There's a kind of tension in the what if of it all, I guess. If he'd relented and played his usual stuff in the usual way, maybe the myth of Bob Dylan would have died there. As we know, the stubborn Bob Dylan goes ahead with his electric guitar, and we get one of the film's only blatant moments of revisionism. The band starts, and they start loud, but the sound is powerful and tight and definitive. In truth, Dylan's electric set got off to a rocky start. They were too loud and sounded like shit. The film's Pete Seeger tries to cut the sound at the desk with the aim of preventing a riot, but the real Seeger did it to save everyone's ears. If the movie's triumphant ending was supposed to represent the start of the rest of Bob Dylan's strange and mysterious career, it would be a bit of a wet fart for Mangold to show it how it actually went down. We know now that Dylan's career has been fraught with many peaks and valleys. A complete unknown doesn't go in for that kind of nuance, and that's fine. The movie ends in '65, and the messy Bob Dylan legend continues on to present day. Save for this little bit of theatre, Dylan's rise to fame, the way he steered 60s culture, we can now make up our own minds about who the man is and what he stands for. He's not even dead yet. Incidentally, 2020's Rough and Rowdy Ways is an excellent record. In terms of performances, Chalamet is perfectly serviceable as Dylan. He's got the pastiche down, the mannerisms, the vocal drawl, the mumble, everything you expect. Monica Barbaro is great as Joan Baez, and I'm told she, like Chalamet, did all the singing herself, which is pretty fantastic. Elle Fanning Sylvia does what a doomed lover type ought to do. When she leaves, you just wish she would stay. Interestingly, this movie features the second use of "It Ain't Me, Babe" as a subtextual device for revealing secret trysts and competing affections. James Mangold had Joaquin Phoenix and Reese Witherspoon do that exact same thing in 2005's I Walk the Line. If it works, I guess. Ed Norton is also good as Pete Seeger. I wonder if that's due to Ed's work or the fact that Seeger is portrayed very agreeably as possibly the nicest and purest man in history. By all accounts, the man was a great father, husband, and firebrand for American folk music. In this movie, he functions as Dylan's father, full of love and support, always gentle with his rebukes. The bottom line is this: if you like Bob Dylan, A Complete Unknown will only reinvigorate the legend, and you'll be listening to Highway 61 Revisited on the way home from the cinema. The movie is dutiful, refreshingly apolitical given the setting, and very competently made. It brings forth the good kind of nostalgia. First you feel that, despite all the melodrama and folklore, there really was a time that felt like this. Then you remember it'll never happen again. If you don't like Dylan, maybe after seeing this you'll be tempted to revisit his catalogue, if for no other reason than to try and figure out, once again, what the fuss is all about. Here's one final thought. For a movie that clearly aims to depict Dylan's resentment for convention, it tells his story in a super conventional way, in that it follows Mangold's tried and true biopic template. I imagine Dylan wouldn't like the movie at all. It's in love with what he used to be, both the truths and the exaggerations. It doesn't, as the film's Johnny Cash puts it several times, drag any mud on the carpet.